everybody. It's Thursday.
And welcome to this week's edition of The Night Bite.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Emily. And thanks for being here with us tonight.
Yep.
We got some great ice fishing to be talking about, and I guess all kinds of stuff coming at you. So, if you have peeked ahead and see who our guest is, and if you have questions or anything right up off the bat, feel free to get that into the comments section.
Yep.
And we would love to talk about that as we go through the evening.
Anthony, how are you?
Otherwise, feel free to check in because we always love to hear your different ice fishing reports and how your ice fishing season is going. So if you are out there and you are catching fish, or if not, let us know how that's going for you, and we'll share some of that same information as well.
Absolutely.
Before we get there, I guess maybe mention this a few times tonight if we can. Ice Junkies Outdoors, if you know about them or if you don't, they are a fabulous group, and go and check them out on Facebook. But they have a meet and greet and tournament and ultimately a fundraiser that is coming up this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And I happen to know that they have some fabulous prizes along with a really fun time and a really fun tournament that all goes for some really great causes. So I know in past years they've raised quite a large sum of money, and it's all gone back to youth fishing and local fisheries and all of that. So Ice Junkies Outdoors is a totally volunteer community, and all of that money goes straight back to all those great places that they mentioned. There is none of it that stays like in-house to pay employees or anything like that. So that when you're coming to an event like that, that's for a really great cause, and you're going to have a really great time. So come down, say hi to us, and we're excited to be there this weekend.
Absolutely. Hero Fishing checking in. How are you? Eric, Ray, how are you now? It was gonna be fun. We're gonna be right the south side of the landing in our big otter hub. If you see the otter hub with smoke coming out of it, that's probably gonna be us. So come stop by and say hi if you're up in Siren, Wisconsin. This last weekend we got kind of the kinks worked out. We're leaving some stuff home that we didn't necessarily need that we brought last weekend, and we're a little bit more prepared for some crazy situations, because we had a crazy situation on our hands last weekend.
And one of the things that you mentioned is if there's smoke coming out, so you'll know because we have a wood burning stove. So there's a whole pipe that kind of sticks out. And depending on how much wood we have going through there is depending on how much smoke you will or will not see. But either way, come and say hi. And tonight we're going to highlight some of the pros and cons of how last week's, ice camping went, and talk about a few of those things that we're going to do different. But we do always start kind of with an ice report. How was the ice this past weekend?
Ice is good. We put down the camera, and besides a couple inches of slush on top, we had probably 12 inches of really good clear ice on these lakes that we were fishing. They're just not very pressured. They're for the most part pretty private, so there's not a whole lot of activity out there besides the locals. Ice was good. We took the snowmobile across both bodies of water checking ice, and it was good.
There were quite a few spots that were slushy. So, if you're out there with your machine, just know kind of where you're at and what you're doing and all of those different details. But we did find that once some of those slush pockets opened, it was a small enough lake that, we got a deep freeze that set in Saturday night. I think it was supposed to come a little bit later on Sunday, and it came early, and and anywhere that the slush pockets were exposed, it did seem to firm them up quite a bit, and that made travel at least the next day a little bit, I was going to say smoother, but if you've been on a snowmobile over ice, that's not necessarily smooth either. But, it wasn't slushy. And so that was interesting how the conditions changed even kind of overnight in that situation. So I guess we've been hearing all kinds of the smoke is from the hot bite. I love that. Eric, we're going to come and visit your shack. I can't even remember what I was saying now. I'm thinking about fishing, a hot bite. Because I was thinking about the ice conditions. We all kind of heard this past weekend about what's been happening out on Green Bay. I heard that there was another little rescue today. And everyone
Mhm.
seems to be making it back to land and all seems to be well. But those are conditions or situations that we don't want to ever be in, anyways. And I've heard that people may be starting to get fined for different aspects of those rescues. And man, the numbers I don't have anything official, so I'm not going to toss numbers out at you right now. But some of the bills that might come to people's house might be quite large compared to what I've seen.
Yeah, I guess so.
So I guess with that, if you guys have ice reports or fishing reports or anything like that, then leave that in the comments.
Mhm.
Otherwise, let's get to our guest, and we're gonna talk a little bit more fishing throughout the night.
Yeah.
So, Doug, you're here from Smackdown Outdoors podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So I imagine that there's a lot of people who, do know who you are. But in case there is anybody who has never, kind of, I always say met you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Born and raised Minnesota. I'm 40 years old. So, it's all downhill from here, apparently. But, I grew up hunting, fishing, the old man would take me out, and there was a time in my teens and early 20s where I didn't do it. Too busy working, too busy doing things that teenagers and, young 20 somethings do. But then I got back into fishing, and, it was an immediate, oh, that's right. This is cool. This is fun. As far as hunting is concerned, I started hunting in 05, 06, I think, deer hunting. I was at a birthday party and somebody asked me if they wanted, if I wanted to help them work on deer stands. And I'm like, I like the woods and I don't mind working, whatever, let's go. And he goes, well, that means you're deer hunting with us too. So of course, deer hunting leads to turkey hunting, leads to duck hunting, goose. It's, the addiction of it all. But, I started out this podcast and live streaming thing because I decided that I wanted to teach people how to hunt and, show people stuff like that. So my wife got me one of those little Sony cameras and never really did anything worthwhile putting on YouTube or Facebook or anything or whatever. I don't know. 05, was that even a thing yet? Facebook? I can't remember, but, I tried that, failed, done some other stuff, failed, and started listening to podcasts, probably 4 or 5 years ago. And one day I just said, I could probably do a podcast. What should I do it about? Well, the outdoors. And by that time, I'm in the industry and I know so many people that I knew it wouldn't be hard to get guests. So I bought a microphone, started talking into it, getting used to, talking into a microphone and whatnot. And then started doing the podcast. And then it turned into doing video where I just recorded the video. And I'm kind of one of these people where it's like, I never want to just stay here. I always want to level up. So it's like, what's the next thing? Live. And now it's not just live, but how fancy can I get with the live? I've got all this, I've got so many pieces of hardware and software in front of me. My bank account's saying enough for now. But, at the end of the day, I open my show, Smackdown Outdoors podcast. I'm the host, Doug Glimmerveen, just teaching the world about the great outdoors, one episode at a time. Whether it's fishing, hunting, trapping, doesn't matter. I just like teaching people. And the easiest way for me to do that is to have people that know more than me join me and we do a podcast together. So that's kind of my deal.
One of the most interesting things about that is that you're talking about being interested in, kind of sharing with people and helping to educate others. And I guess this is kind of like a two-part question, or if you call it a question. But number one, I think people don't often like sharing information because that might lead to them catching fish. And like, what if that happens,
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that's really super interesting about that is I think not everybody realizes what they have to teach others.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the fact that you're able to kind of look at the things that you're doing and, start even at a basic place and be able to share that with people who, are kind of across the levels of ability. People clearly love listening to it. And so to be able to kind of put that all together is a really awesome thing.
I'm going to fully agree with you on the first part. People don't like sharing because they think that all of a sudden people are going to move in on their spots and steal their fish or whatever. And it's like, okay, you don't give them your spot on the spot kind of thing, right? Like if we go to Mille Lacs, there's a lot of spot on the spot things, whatever, but you can go, early season, go to the east side of the lake, late season, go to the south side, blah, blah, blah kind of thing. But I think even beyond that is teaching techniques, teaching those patterns, information on how to fish, not where to fish, is what we really need to start focusing on. And I know a lot of people do it, but it's just frustrating when you see somebody who's new to it and they say that. They go, I don't know what to do because I can't, nobody wants to tell me anything. Well, that's where I'm like, hey, we might not tell you where, but we're going to tell you how. We're going to tell you what to look for. We're going to tell you everything that we possibly can to help you get into it, be successful. As far as the spots, well, that's up to you to find out, really. That's part of the game of fishing and in the outdoors, even hunting. Where are the deer? Where are they coming from? We can teach you everything that you need to know about any game, but you still have to go out and actually find that game. So,
well, that's actually, I'm going to break in quick because that's really interesting. I was going to ask about, you're talking about this teach people how to fish and all of that. But, I was going to kind of almost sarcastically ask about, well, with the introduction of like, all of these fancy graphs, you can track down fish 80 feet away, like a mile away, like whatever you could do. It's amazing. And so I can't tell you how many times, even just this hard water season so far, that I've seen somebody post like, hey, caught these fish due to Panoptics, due to Live Scope. And it's like a ton of beautiful big fish displayed out. And, that's an interesting thing, like when people are able to go out and find those fish, I mean, the where and the how, or I meant the how is important, but it's amazing sometimes as long as you land on biting fish, sometimes they're just biting. And I don't know, that's just changing up kind of how things are going lately.
All right. I mean, Panoptics, Mega Live, or whatever the Lowrance one is, Active Target, they will help you find fish faster. Yes, because you can scan out however far it is, do a 360 and go, they're 120 feet over there, so let's go over there. But the key is, can you get those fish over there at 120 feet away to bite your lure?
Well, and can you get that far while they're still there? And then
well, that's the thing.
Walk all that far and they moved already.
they say that you'll have to drill less holes with Panoptics. No, you actually drill more because you're chasing. You're constantly, especially the crappies that are out in a basin roaming. If you just drill a hole and wait, those fish will come back. Meanwhile, your buddies have chased them all the way back to you and maybe picked off one here, maybe picked off one there.
That's actually funny. One day late last year, I want to say, we were out on a spot, the backwaters of the Wolf River. And it's it's an interesting spot, but kind of the fish, they don't go through this whole horseshoe spot, and so we ended up with a bunch of holes. I ended up with my AquaView down, and I started to realize what you're talking about, this pattern of how they were going in a circle. I was actually really, I always know fish move around, but sometimes you get stuck in that mindset of like, it's winter, fish go deep or they calm down, they're not moving around all that much, but they do. Sometimes fish are shallow, sometimes they are deep, but sometimes fish move and cruise around like crazy. But when you can predict or understand that path or that pattern that they're taking, I was lucky enough, it was a small enough spot that with the camera, I was able to identify that. But with any larger body of water, a lake, you do need that larger equipment. That's a crazy thing to see, though.
Yeah. I mean, it does help you. Sometimes you can go out there, scan, and those fish just sit there and you go drill on top of them and you just catch the heck out of them. But I don't know. It's very mood dependent on the fish. What are they doing? And that's, once again, all the fancy equipment in the world doesn't matter if you can't figure out what they're doing and catch them.
Well, and actually Ryan is making a fabulous point here. he's saying, you know, that running and gunning is not what you're not using Panoptics or Mega Live at that point. You know, you're using probably a conventional flasher, like we have our whole hopper bucket set up with our Vexlars. And then in that case, you know, punch a bunch of holes. You can move around. That's super portable. But you know, that is true. Some of these other graphs, you know, they can tell you things about fish being far away, but it is hard to move it sometimes point A to B to C.
Yep. And if people don't think that the fish are gonna get used to and become shy of Panoptics and these front-facing sonars, they're fooling themselves. They do it with down sonars all the time. That's why a lot, you know, trolling with planer boards is so effective, especially in clear lakes, because I talked to a guy that does crappie tournaments and whatnot down south, and he has Panoptics on his boat, and he can watch the fish in front of him split apart as he's coming 100 feet away. It's the noise, it's the Panoptics, it's the motor, it's all that stuff. So they're going to get used to it. They're going to understand what it is. They're going to go, okay, here's that ping, ping, ping. Let's move. And, you know, that's where just drilling holes, staying in those areas where the fish were, I think it's going to ebb and flow just like anything else.
Yeah.
Interesting. Actually, that's a good viewpoint.
Yeah. To answer your second question, I guess.
Oh yeah, I forgot that we were all the way back there.
Here's the podcaster in me. Most people would just be like, all right, what are they going to ask me now? Yeah. I think it was something to do with the amount of information that we don't think we have, but we actually do. Was that what it was?
Yeah, actually, yeah, man, you're good. I forgot about that even.
I have a funny story. So the tagline of my show used to be, and this comes from back when I was doing the YouTube thing and I was in my buddy's fish house. I had, you know, like 2 or 3 cameras with, and he goes, what are those for? And I use this as my tagline in a lot of the episodes of the show back in the day was, I'm just an idiot with a microphone, a camera, and a dream. And I kept doing that. And that was my tagline. And then I got a message from somebody to call them. Somebody very high up in the industry. Everybody basically knows this guy's name. I'm going to keep his name out of it, but you know, I was like, hi, how you doing? You know, what do you want from me, kind of thing. And he goes, hey, I saw the show, you know, I've seen different episodes, stop the tagline. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I'm thinking he's like offended by it somehow, like it's something bad for the industry. And he goes, look, you know more than you lead on. Like, you're not an idiot anymore. Like, maybe when you first started out, you might have been a quote unquote idiot, but at this point, people know that you're smarter than your tagline states. So stop using it. And I did, because I just kind of sat back and I'm like, it's true. You know, we all know more than we think we do, but we're afraid to put it out there because we don't want to sound, you know, have somebody come in, and especially on Facebook and stuff, and go, well, no, that's not right. That's not right. You know, that's you got to do it this way. You got to do it that way. So I think a lot of people just keep the information to themselves and just go, okay, I'm just going to do my thing. And then that's it. So.
Yeah.
That is actually really interesting. I mean, I think that is true. Like, people are really concerned about being judged on social media. But it makes me think a lot of the different guests that we've had on, you know, so often we have a guest that's like, I really am not interesting. Like, are you sure that you want to have me here? And I'm like,
they
yeah,
all say
absolutely.
that. Every single one of them's like, I don't know. I'm just a dude that fishes. I'm like, yeah, but you know stuff about it that I might not know. So let's talk.
Well, but the cool thing about the internet, though, is that it takes that kind of regionality out of it. You know, just because everybody in this part of Wisconsin like fishes this way, you know, the people in Michigan fish different or whatever, you know, and maybe that's by species, maybe that's by body of water, it's a river or it is a lake or whatever. But it's amazing the number of people that we talk to on these shows that all they're doing is the thing that they do every day. Like, it's nothing novel to them, but maybe it is a totally unique thing to somebody else. And when you can take, you know, somebody else's, I guess, tips or tricks or experience, and apply that to what you're doing, sometimes it doesn't work out at all. And that's kind of funny, you know, but sometimes when you can apply that and you can do that, just showing fish a presentation or a technique or something that they haven't seen before, sometimes that's what turns it right on.
Everybody's got the local tackle shop, right? And every local tackle shop has that one guy that's there all the time that is the crazy dude, right? He fishes some wacky way, I don't know, but just he's got some weird thing that he does that he just rants and raves about, and everybody looks at him and goes, that dude's nuts. Don't listen to him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't catch fish. Here's what you do. You take what he says, you put it in the back of your mind, and if you're out there and it's a tough bite, or even better if it's a good bite, because then you can actually see if it does work on biting fish. But if it's a tough bite and nothing else is working, try out what he said. Throw that spinner bait down there through the ice. Who cares? You're not catching fish anyway. And all of a sudden, you catch an 8-pound walleye. I mean, it's worth listening. Just because he sounds like he's nuts doesn't mean he has not caught a fish that way. I mean, every lure that's ever been sold, ever been made, has caught a fish. So there's nothing saying some dude making up things in the back of the tackle shop. Maybe that's the ticket on some body of water somewhere.
So we're talking about, everyone's usuals and their go-to and typical and all of that. So what is your usual or go-to or typical setup?
Boy, here we go. Well, if we're talking panfish, I actually was, before we started here, I was messing around, kind of re-rigging stuff for this weekend, and I'll just grab my rods here, my 4 rods I got, and we'll just kind of go through them. All right. We will start with like moving baits, I guess we'll kind of call it. Let's see. Hopefully I'm not messing up any of the audio stuff. I'm laying rods all over the place here. But something like this here. This is that Euro Tackle mini Z Viber. Start out something like that, or just any small lipless crankbait. And there's the T-Rip and all sorts of different stuff. Things like that. I always like to have one of those tied on. And then where'd the other one go?
Are you putting bait on that or plastic, or just using that as is?
Yeah, I'll throw up on that. I'll throw like Eurolarva spikes on there. Just one on the back, or maybe 2, depending on how the fish want it or not. Sometimes I have tried on things like that, plastics. I can't say whether or not it works better or worse. It just depends on the moods of things like that. It's kind of like when you're dragging a crankbait in open water. It's moving so fast and so violently that the fish really don't seem to be too worried about having live bait on it. Something like this here, you're bouncing that thing up and down constantly. Some guys, do it a little lighter. Maybe live bait works better on that, but I'm more of that. Let's just get some aggressive fish. And that's what I'll start out with, is that there, to just see where these, what the aggressive fish are. And then I'll move to a different setup, depending on, of course, whether or not they're biting that. If they keep biting that, it keeps getting thrown down the hole until they stop biting. So, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, our goal as fishermen is to take bait, put it in front of fish's mouths, and have it there as long as we possibly can until they bite. So, if they're aggressive, they're going to bite something that's moving up and down a whole lot. If they're not, that's when we start moving down to something else I've got here. But yeah, so I just kind of use that. See if they bite it, cool. If they don't, then I move on. That kind of thing. The next one that I always have tied on always is the Northland Tackle Forage Minnow. And this is the 132nd. It's the tiny one. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you guys can see the color, but I'm not going to say what it is. You guys can all watch the replay and screenshot it. But this one here for bluegills is my number one go-to bait to start out with. If they're hitting this, then it's a really, really, really good day.
Really? Okay, then, that's interesting.
Yeah. And then this I'll throw, because if they're hitting this, they are hitting this, and it's like they never stop. And this color here is the color, kind of throw it up in front of you guys. See if the camera can catch the focus. But anyway, we'll just if you're a Minnesota football fan, there you go. There you go. But that I'll throw some 1, 2, 3 spikes. Kind of depends on what the mood is. If they're biting it but not really committing, I'll start out with 1. Then I'll go to 2, see if they commit some more. If they don't commit any harder, then I'll just go back to 1. Or if they're still not, if I go back to 1 and they're still not, if I'm catching them but they're not like committing suicide, I might stick with it. But then what I'll do is I'll go to a jig, and I always have 2 sizes tied on right there.
There you go. That's a Wonder Bread jig.
Yeah, that's the Wonder Bread. If anybody knows me, they know that Wonder Bread is my go-to when it comes to jigs. Out of the box, I always go to Wonder Bread. I don't know if it works any better than just plain white, because I've always been just a plain white jig guy. And then, Brandt came out with the whole Wonder Bread thing, and everybody lost their minds. They're paying $7, $8, $9 for 1 jig. And I'm like, no, I'm good. And then when I started getting into tungstens, that's when the prices were cheaper. So I tried it in some, Widowmaker or something like that. And it was, like I said, I don't know if they bid anymore, but it seemed like it did because it was a new bait and they're biting it right away. So it's like, yeah, I bought something that works. Great. And now I'm addicted to Wonder Bread. I've even got it in that Euro Tackle Mini Z Viber, and spoons and puppet minnows, anything I can get. Crankbaits, big crankbaits. I've got it. I don't know what it is. I'm a Wonder Bread guy. So.
So you had mentioned Widowmaker lures, and we actually love them. So shout out to them really quick. But the other thing that you were showing is your Northland Little Minnow, and that is awesome. And so definitely keep using that, especially if it's one of your favorites. But Widowmaker has some really cute little minnow type jigs like that you could also check out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Northland Tackle Pro staffer, but I've been using Northland Tackle since I was fishing with my dad. Like, who hasn't had a Northland jig, open water ice fishing in their tackle box at some period? I mean, it's a staple. But yeah, there's plenty of other good stuff out there, because there's different designs, and not everything and not every fish is going to bite that same lure every single time. It's just not going to work every single place you go, every single body of water, every single fish. It's just not. If it was, there'd be like three baits out there. Otherwise, everybody else would be shut down. They just all go by Northland Tackle. I mean, what's the point of having everybody else make stuff if that one bait catches all the fish?
Yeah.
And the last one up is if they get real finicky, that's when we're going the micro.
Oh yeah.
This one here is actually a P3 plastics, and I don't know if you can even tell or not. I'm trying to get it focused.
Oh yeah, there you go. Oh yeah, now we can tell.
Yeah, it's
I don't know if you're on your phone, you probably can't tell, but that's definitely a Wonder jig from here.
Yep, it's a Wonder Bread jig. Yep, it's Wonder Bread. So, like I said, I'm slightly addicted to it, probably to a fault, but it's all good. But yeah, if they're real finicky, I'll go to the micro, and then P3 plastics. They've got the micro plastics that match up to that stuff really, really, really well. And that was one of the reasons I didn't get into the micro game until about a year or 2 ago, is I couldn't find plastics that were small enough to make it look like it was supposed to, lay on the jig how it was supposed to, and act like it was supposed to, without murdering a piece of plastic and then it gets all messed up and all that stuff. So now that I've added the micro fishing game in, I think that's like a 2, something like that. It's just ridiculously small. Now when they're real finicky, I can catch more because I've got that good setup there. So that's my that's my setup for panfish, basically. And then of course I've got different spoons and different jigs and this and that and the other. I mean, I can show you stuff all night long, but that's my kind of go-to stuff. Kind of a lipless crankbait, a spoon, and then a bigger jig and a smaller jig.
Well, and so I think a huge takeaway message from that is just having those different setups available, because that's right off the bat something that not everybody does. And something that honestly I know I need to start doing, because when you have those rods set up, it's easier to go between them, and it's easier to find what fish are biting on. Or God forbid you get bitten off, it's easy to switch something else. Sometimes the key is just to getting a bait down there to those fish.
Well, that's what I need to do is get another one of these small setups, because when Josh came into before we started, Josh came in and I was sitting here tying this and I'm like, I'm getting too old. I can't see the eyelet. So I need to get like at least one more setup for my micro stuff. So I have it set up. And if I break off 2 throughout the day, I just bump up the size. But I might go 3. I don't know. So I really don't have to do that outside in the wind with 3 pound. I think it's 3 pound test I got on here, which probably, no, or is this 2? This might be 2 pound test. I don't know, but it's small and I can't see it inside half the time. So outside in the wind and the elements and the cold fingers and the wet, it's not happening. I never retie this.
Well, so since you're inside and there's no wind and then you have like good light and all, that's really easy to do. You're using some really fancy knots then?
I'm very, very basic, like Palomar knot on the spoon, on the Z Viber, on the jigs. I go with a loop knot, and I'm like, I make it very simple, like stupid simple. And some people have said, "Yo, you gotta tie it how it's supposed to be tied, otherwise you're gonna break off and whatnot." I don't. Basically, I just run it through once, and then I got my loop, I've got my jig. And then I'll just tie a knot and try to make that loop as small as I can. So I don't know. I haven't had a fish break off yet, but it saved me a whole lot of hassle. And I can't get the loop quite as small as when you tie an actual loop knot, but I haven't had a problem with that either. I don't think the fish care whether or not your loop is really, really, really small or like a 1/4 inch. So, and what the loop knot does is, especially on those finicky bluegills, they'll suck it in and they're so fast that they can spit it out. Well, they suck it in on the loop knot, gives it more freedom to actually go in. And if you're kind of doing that tight line method, or you're really watching your line, you can see that what a lot of people call up bites are actually them just biting on and holding it and not going anywhere. And that's what's releasing the tension on the line. But it just gives that jig more freedom to move, and they can suck it in with less resistance, I guess.
I think another thing that I'm a big proponent of loop knots, and I use it almost everything that I tie on.
And he makes really small ones and teases me because I cannot. All my loops are kind of big.
I can never remember how. I had a guy teach me. Here's the deal. The crazy dude at the tackle shop taught me how. I'm not kidding you. He's the one that taught me how to tie a loop knot, but I couldn't remember from the time he taught me to the time that I went and tied it. So I was like, there's got to be an easier way. And I'm just kind of messing around. I go, wait a minute. If I just go through once and then take it all, tie it in a knot, wait, that works. Why do I need to go like through 14 fingers and around? No, I'm just going to do it this way. And then I have a problem breaking off, that's when I'll get on YouTube and sit there one day and just continuously tie it until I don't even have to think about it. But for now, how I do it, it works. Do it however you want. And the thing with knots is, whatever works for you, whatever you can tie behind your back, tie that knot. Tie that knot. I don't care if it like, Gerald Swindle, a double shindo, wiggly wart knot or whatever. Tie that knot because you can tie it. Now, practice the other knots when you're not fishing to get used to them. Same thing, open water. There's different knots, but practice them. So then if you want to switch over someday, you can.
Yeah, but make that first knot something really fancy and unique and funny.
Right.
And then tell us about it. No, I'm kidding.
Well, all I was going to say about the loop knots is that just being able to tie them on everything, the spoons and the Z Vibers and stuff too. When you do hook into a bigger fish, there is a little bit of more movement in your bait, so they can get less leverage on it. It's kind of like having a swivel. Like we fish with even in our mono setups, I'll take a leader of just whatever mono I'm using and put on a small swivel and then tie it to the main line, just because it keeps all the twisting down. And you get an occasional pike or a pout or something that likes to spin up on your line. They can't do it as easily with that swivel or with the loop knot.
Yeah, I mean, I really only use a swivel if I'm throwing like, for walleye and I'm rattle baits, puppet minnows, glide baits, stuff like that, where you get a lot of like jigs. I don't know. In spoons, it's down there enough, long enough, and it doesn't you're not ripping it, big rips or anything where it's going to come up and then swim down and do all this stuff. I mean, a jig, you're doing this, you're just bouncing it up and down, kind of same thing with a spoon. So over time of you just having it down there, it's going to just kind of end up sitting there and not really spinning. If you ever watch it on an Aquaview camera, I mean, your jig, especially if you keep it moving, your jig just sits there and just bounces up and down. So, and then with the inline reels these days, I don't know if it's a big deal for using swivels, unless, like I said, it's something that, big, like a rattle bait or a glide bait or something where it's actually meant to kind of dart away and flutter and do different stuff like that.
Yeah.
But here's the deal. I'm not saying don't do it. If you want to, go ahead. I don't care. I just personally don't. It's one less thing. The more components you have, and I don't care if it's fishing, hunting, or whatever, right? Live streaming, the more components you have, the more points of failure you have.
Right.
So if you put a swivel in there, you just gave yourself 2 more points of failure.
Yep.
Not failure, just, pulling out or whatever. So I try to go with the least amount of points of failure as possible. And that's with anything I do.
Yeah.
Except
a great point.
Except of course, live streaming. Let's just give more tech to me.
Just add in as many difficult procedures as possible. So one of the other things that you had mentioned before the show actually was about night fishing bluegills.
Yes.
And I couldn't let it go without asking more. So is that like your favorite time to go, the best time to go? What can you tell me about that?
It's not something that I do as much as I want to. There are, let's see, 1, 2, 3 lakes, and there are crappies mixed in with them too, but they all had basically a strict night bite. Like you couldn't really find the fish during the day. You might pick off one here, one there, but you get your house set up and they come out at dark, and you're using the same stuff that you would normally. But I like dead sticking, and we're talking artificials, like the jigs, with just a plastic that moves a lot. I use glows a lot so that you can see and continuously charge them up and down. But a lot of it is just, if you get in the right spot, you sit there, you've got your 2 lines out here in Minnesota anyway, just 2. You're welcome, Wisconsin. You guys have 3 or whatever, or unlimited, who knows what it is. But you just sit there and you watch your graph and you watch your bait. And when the fish, show up, basically I just start, kind of grabbing the rod, and they'll just come up and bite it for the most part. There's times where if they start, sinking back down or away, then you start jigging them, working them, and then you might be able to catch them too. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoy it. And it's, it gives you something to do instead of just sleeping. So
Instead of just sleeping, right?
Yeah.
So then as far as, you're in Minnesota. I was going to say you probably don't even use a green light. That's something that some people insist that you have. So you can't even do that. That's kind of funny. Sorry.
Yeah, we can't. Yeah. Keep just, okay. Yeah. 3 lines, green light.
Come visit anytime.
So now I haven't lived in Minnesota for quite a number of years, but I believe when I lived there, they said no electronic light, right? Or is the verbiage artificial?
You cannot put a light source underneath the ice to attract fish. I don't think, it doesn't matter if it's, artificial or not. You can, if it is part of the bait, and that's where like Northland Tackle has the glow shot series, and Lindy does, and everybody seems to have a glowing or blinking light these days. If it's part of the lure, then you're okay. But if you're taking, like you guys have those green lights, you take that and you put it under the ice in Minnesota, you better not have a single piece of tackle with you. And then I don't even know if it's legal to put the light underneath the ice anyway. It might be completely illegal to do that. So, even if you just want to just break out the, hey, I'm just filming fish here. Well, sorry. So I would, if you're planning on just filming fish at night with a light in Minnesota, contact the DNR and tell them exactly what you're doing. Try not to sound shady, because hi. Hi. Yeah. So I want to go out to a lake and I want to throw a green light under the water to attract fish, but I'm not fishing. I swear I'm not fishing. I just want to take this little camera and throw it down there and film them. But yeah, so I don't know if you can even put a light underneath the ice here just for that fact. But yeah, we can't use them here in Minnesota. See, the thing is that us Minnesotans have decided, this is kind of how I think we've come up with all this stuff. Only 2 lines, no green light. Is that we look at Wisconsin and go, what do? We don't need to do that. So you know.
Well, and so the reason I bring it up is because there's so I'm the crazy tackle shop guy that you keep talking about, right? So
Right.
I've over the years I've accumulated some old fishing tip books, right? So the old ones back in the 30s and 40s, and one tip that's really stuck with me, and I pull it out every once in a while, maybe not so much anymore, but I used to, is you put minnows in a mason jar, half dozen minnows, a dozen minnows, and you have holes in the top, and then you just attach like a piece of paracord, and you put the lid on the jar, and you just hang it, and so it makes an artificial bait ball.
Okay.
It's basically your minnow bucket, right? But it
Right.
just is like 3 or 4 feet under the ice, and it does what that does is it keeps fish in the area longer when you're catching them. Doesn't necessarily attract fish, but what it does is when fish come in and you pick one off, they see the minnows there, and then you can put more minnows down on top of them, and they'll eat it, and it just keeps them there. But in the past I have run, like when I first moved to Wisconsin, I put one of the snap sticks, the snap glow sticks, in the jar with the minnows. The whole thing about the light is it's supposed to attract bugs.
Right.
I don't know if the light necessarily made a difference with the minnow jar trick, but the minnow jar trick does work in certain situations.
Now, I wonder if it works better in like clear water versus dirty water.
Yep.
Water where lakes where there's not a lot of vegetation, because fish are very structure orientated. So if you get a body of water where there's like nothing, and then you find one stick that is there, there'll be fish next to the stick because it's some sort of structure. They took a big tank, clear tank, nothing in it, put some fish in it. They took a marker and drew a line on the tank, and all the fish went right to that line and hung out there because they just look for stuff. They just look for stuff to hang out on because it's structure, it's security, it's cover, it's and so I mean, I don't doubt that would probably work. I mean, there's a bunch of minnows there. It'd be kind of cool to do that now and just to see if and get some aggressive fish that are hungry and sit there with an aqua view and see if they're trying to get to through the jar and stuff. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
So when you don't have a green light or magic jars with fish in it or whatever, one of the other keys, you had said, oh, use your regular tackle and do your regular things or try dead stick. But the key to that before all of that was setting up your shack in the right place. And I think a lot of times especially the night fishing, people are trying too deep. So where do you go to try to find success for night fishing or especially for your bluegills?
We had a spot where it was 30-ish feet. It was 30 something feet, like 31, 32 feet. Nothing around.
Except one stick.
It must have been just bugs and except for what?
One stick.
Yeah, except for one stick. Yeah, but I think what that spot is it was a muddy bottom, so that's where the bugs came up. So then at night, so the fish came in there. But I've also done it in 15 feet, and in weedier areas. So the big thing is night bite. You can't even say go out during the day and scout for the night because they're not going to be in the same spots. Now, if you do know where fish are, if they're deeper throughout the day, look for the closest structure up shallow, and then maybe go set up there. But it's tough. You just kind of got to poke around and try to find fish. What I would do, not just go set up and fish all night right away, just fish past dark. And if you find fish, follow them. for a while, and then mark that spot and then come back later. Come back at a later date and then fish that spot up shallow, or maybe go a little shallow, or maybe stay a little deeper, whatever, just in that general area. But there hasn't been a whole lot of science to it. It's just kind of like, well, this is where fish have been, so this is where we're gonna set up and see what happens. And
okay, but on the contrary, one of the things that I'm hearing you say right now is, sometimes it is that shallow by those weeds, looking for the green weeds is especially important, but sometimes it is that 30 or 35 feet, whatever. But the key of what you were saying is when it's deep like that, usually it's like a mud flat or something. At that point, it is a bug bite. When you are fishing up more in those weeds, a lot of times, there's bugs there, of course, because that's how nature goes, but at that point, I imagine that's a more heavy minnow bite.
Yeah.
And so, like you're saying, that's one of those things that you can't really go and find out during the day because all of that changes. It's totally different. But if that's one of those things that you can learn about a lake over time, that is one of those things that can then help guide those decisions.
Yeah.
That's scientific.
Well, think, just like any fish, open water, ice fishing, whatever. Fishing is, the more you do it, the more experience you have, the more knowledge you get. So like you said, it's, the more you do it, the more times you go out there and you try different spots, and that, if you get a mud flat or whatever, move around and you might end up if you want to find bugs, like I said, don't fully set up all at once, because I'm talking like overnight, like we're fishing dusk till dawn and they'll come through all night long. So when you get out there before the sun goes down, you find some fish, follow them around, and then watch your sonar unit. If all of a sudden, and we've all had this happen, it's just static, quote unquote static, no, that's probably bugs. So what I would do is put a waypoint there and try that, because that might be a very good spot for a nighttime bite.
Well, and this brings up a really, like, it comes back around to kind of what we did this weekend, and so what we know about the lakes we were fishing this weekend is, one, they're pretty small, but two, we know that there's a massive piece of structure in the middle of the one, and adjacent to that structure, maybe within 50 yards or less, there's a point that comes out into the main body of the lake. And it comes up to like 6 feet on the top of it. And we were going back and forth as to where to set up, and we kind of ended up somewhere in the middle, and we ended up putting our shack in about 14 feet of water, and our holes we were facing the shore. So the holes were in between us and the shoreline. We found, we got this phenomenon where fish were coming up at like 6 feet of water, and then they would go straight down on the Vexlar. Well, just because of how a Vexlar works, like it has a cone, right? And this drop off is fairly steep. What was happening was fish were coming off of where they were feeding and going back down, following the contour back down into the main basin until they came back up to feed again. And then we ended up picking off some decent fish as they were doing that. Had we moved our shack 20 feet shallower, we would have been on the main fish bite where they were up there eating, and then the fish were going back and forth. But it's those little things that you notice like that throughout your daytime, throughout your night, and knowing, we know that the fish hang out on the structure during the day in the middle of the lake, then they move up. And then just knowing like, oh, why are there fish constantly coming up at 6 feet and then going to the bottom? Well, they're not going to the bottom. They're just following the hill. Yep.
I've had them do the opposite, where in a small bay, the whole bay is like, it goes probably the first 10 feet, just a nice, gradual break. And then it just, to the bottom just falls out. And what these fish do, they don't go down, they go across. So you can be in the middle and they'll be, 6-8 feet underneath the ice in 30 feet. And it's like, what are they doing? What are they doing there? And we're like, the only thing we can think of is that they're just going across the bay. And they're like, well, we're not going to go around. We're not going to go down and follow the bottom. They're just going to go straight across. So, when it comes to things like this is where people say, listen to what the fish are telling you. That's something you're not going to physically hear it, but that's something where the fish are telling you, hey, we're up here, come up here to the party. You guys are too deep. That's where a lot of people, they don't pick up on little nuances like that because they're not listening. And that's what they mean by listen to what the fish are telling you. So always, and that's the thing about fishing is learning. You'll never stop learning. Every single day every time you go out, you will learn something new if you are willing to listen and pay attention to it.
That's a really funny point. Anytime that we go out and we don't catch fish, which really, I mean, that's not that often, but, or if it's like a tough day, I guess. And I'll be like, well, we caught fish, or, well, they were all small, but what did we learn today? And I'll always be grumpy about it at first, but whenever you can have some kind of a takeaway about that, and you'll be like, oh, wait, maybe next time I will do this. And, I think that's what's great about having each other is, we don't necessarily fish the same, but, being able to debrief a fishing spot after the day, I mean, that is kind of cool. And that is something that we learn from for sure.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. And here's the thing is like, if you go out and you smash them, right? I mean, we caught 100 pan fish today. Anything worked. You're not going to learn a lot. It's the days where you actually don't catch anything where you will learn the most if you're willing to listen. What was the temperature? What was the barometer? What was the this? What was that? What was the snow cover? What did I put down there, and how was I jigging it? How did the fish react when they saw that bait? So if you're willing to listen, the tough days, that's when you really want to sit back, take some time and go, okay, what did I do? What were the conditions? What happened today that caused me to go out there and do terrible? If you go out there and like I said, if you just go out there and smash them, well, you're not going to learn much because they're biting everything. They're biting, they're biting my spoon, they're biting your jig, they're biting his, the spinner bait that they decided to throw down the hole because the crazy guy in the tackle shop said to. Those days you don't learn much. Even they might not even be back in that spot for another 5 years. Who knows? It might not even be a spot thing. But the days where you really struggle are the days where you will learn the most.
That is true. That is absolutely true. Daryl saying what he learned last Friday was it was colder than hell. That's funny, but sometimes as an ice fisherman, that's how you learn to be prepared for next time. Yep. He is also asking though, as far as graphs go, the thicker the line on the electronics, does that mean a softer bottom?
Negative. The stronger the return means the harder the bottom. So if your bottom is coming back red, first of all, dial down your gain a bit, because you might, if you're picking up your tungsten jig and it's, an inch wide gap, you need to dial down that gain. But if your gain is set correctly to where you got a small little line or just a flicker of your jig and you got a red bottom and you're deep, we'll say, because up shallow, you're going to get a stronger return. So that kind of throws it off sometimes. But if you're deep, let's say 30 feet, and you got your gain set correctly to where it's picking up your lure correctly as low as you can go, and it's red, that's a harder bottom. Now, what you can do is if you actually set your depth double, and a lot of open water guys do this, they will set the depth manually on their sonar to double the depth. So if you are at flat 30, typically we'll have it like 32. So flat 30, say set it at 65 feet. That'll give you a double return. So you'll actually see two bottoms. So if your first one comes back red, and then the second one comes back with some red in it, you're on a hard bottom. Now, if you go to another spot, same thing, 30 feet, you got that double bottom coming in, double return, and you've got a yellow top and even a weaker yellow bottom, that's soft. So on basically any graph, if you have the normal color set, because on hummingbirds, you can set it for whatever color of the rainbow you want these days, but red, yellow, green, blue, whatever it is, red is always your your strongest return. And if it's mud, it shouldn't come back that hard. But if it's rocks, harder bottom type of stuff, it'll come back red. And if you do that double return, it just confirms what you saw in the first one. And a lot of open water guys use that when they're looking for hard bottom, bass guys and stuff. So
Well, and ultimately it's about, kind of getting to know your equipment and how that
Mhm.
looks for you. And so, if you're able to use a camera or find something that's marked on a map that specifically it's a hard bottom or it's a mud flat or something like that, look at what your graph is telling you at that point and then compare it each time you go out. I mean, I know that's not an immediate answer, but it's going to then teach you what your electronics are telling you because,
Right.
no matter what we sit and tell you or no matter what a YouTube video can show you, when it comes to your unit, how it's your
Mhm.
settings and the things that you've chosen, you want to know what that looks like for you as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I used to watch videos all the time. Side imaging this, side imaging that, how to read it, how to set up this, that, and the other, blah, 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 blah. And I was fishing walleye tournaments at the time, and he had side imaging on the boat, which we never really used. But then one day I'm like, hey, I want to see what this side imaging is all about and take some time. And we knew this one spot was really rocky, like boulders and everything. So we set it up and we just trolled over it. And I sat there and I stared at it and I was like, oh, now I know what I'm looking at. Like before, it's just a bunch of stuff. But if you actually look at it, like we filled up the screen full of, drove long enough to fill the screen. We stopped it and we looked and we're like, okay, there's a boulder, there's a fish, there's a boulder, there's a tree, there's all sorts of stuff. So that's very, very true. And it doesn't even matter if you're using a flasher because every flasher is a little different. We see flashers differently. Human eyes are not all the same. So that's nice that they do have different colors now because some people can't see the normal colors. So they can use, I think orange shows up pretty good for people that might be somewhat colorblind, I think. But yeah, mess around with the colors. I got a buddy that his favorite color pattern is red, white, and blue that Vexlar has because he can see that the best. He's not colorblind. It's just the one that he can see the best. And I'm like, all right, whatever. But yeah, electronics is a lot of tinkering. And then here's the thing a lot of people don't think about, and this is even ice fishing. And this is why they have settings that you can change. Every body of water is different. Water clarity, dirtiness, like stuff in the water, depth, all that stuff, current, blah, 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 blah. So you might go out to one lake one day and it works perfect. The next day, you're like, this thing is a pile of junk. I can't see anything that whatnot. Start messing with those settings. Small changes at first, because you might have to change it. And then when you go to Lake C, you might have to change it again. Mm-hmm. And I'm starting to do that more and more and more, and not just go, okay, well, like, whatever, it works. I'll throw my interference in the number 2 instead of where I should have gone, like through the gain and the clear mode, the max mode, the this, and there's, Humminbird Helix 7s have 45,000 different types of settings in it. It gets confusing and sometimes, but now, I mean, I'm actually, for the first time this weekend, I bought an old Hondex FL8 from my neighbor, and I've got it all set up now. So I have to go out and now learn that thing.
I've got to get out there.
I'm not a flasher guy. I've never been a flasher guy. I've always been a graph guy. Even on the Helix, I've got just graph, just like if you're fishing open water. Just because I like seeing all the lines of the fish and I can just read it better. So now I have to actually go out and mess around with settings and everything and this and that. And like, how far am I? And we're in how deep of water? Okay. So I got to go over here now to this instead of that. And so it's going to be a learning process, but once I get it dialed in, I figure out it's going to be another tool in my toolbox.
That's absolutely true. So I guess, with all of that, we could go and talk fishing probably forever, to be honest. I was going to say all night, for probably even longer than that. But the coolest thing is that both of us kind of have podcasts and answer questions on a weekly or more often basis. And so, if you have different questions, if you have different thoughts, if you have any of those things, tune into these shows because that's all the different kind of stuff that we talk about. So, can you remind people how they can, listen to you or follow you or what your social media is?
Yeah. I want to kind of emphasize that I do put all my episodes out as audio podcasts. So if you're a podcast listener, just look up Smackdown Outdoors and you'll find it. And then you can listen to them all. And, because not everybody's going to be able to watch the lives, but every Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. Sometimes there's guests that are like, well, we're from Wisconsin, so we have to go Wednesday night. Yeah. Yeah, those two. But my previous the week before too, I did. But typically Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. Smackdown Outdoors on Facebook, YouTube. I just got on LinkedIn Live now, but it's just under Doug Glimmerveen there. Where else? And then a couple of Facebook groups or whatever, and then my personal page. But yeah, basically just Smackdown Outdoors anywhere. Come on, watch the YouTube. Trying to push the YouTube a little more. So, yeah. And I'm actually going to start, I started, putting out like YouTube-y videos and whatnot. And then I'm going to be actually documenting my fishing trips this year and putting those out as well. So that's about it.
Good. So that means that people could see another video with us together later this year when we fish together.
Perfect. Works for me. Yeah, my schedule's pretty clear, wide open. I haven't scheduled a lot of things this ice fishing season because weather, like the more the weather just acts weird year to year to year. I'm like, I can't go through and schedule a bunch of stuff because half the things get canceled anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just kind of flying by the seat of my pants. So, it just having more fun actually too.
Oh gosh. Well, I can't wait to see what happens. And as far as tonight, thanks for being here and thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, like I said, I appreciate it. It was fun having you guys on, and we'll have to do this again for sure. Maybe some summertime open water fishing talk. Do that. We'll have you guys come over here, and I'll take you fishing. We'll do that. So
Nice.
no, but yeah, I appreciate it. And the only thing I will tell people is if you've ever wanted to do something like me, wanting to teach people about the outdoors and whatnot, if you ever thought about doing a podcast or writing a book or writing articles or doing anything really, I use quilting a lot, right? As an analogy. If you ever wanted to start quilting, start. There's nobody that can tell you no. Start simple, start basic, and just do it and keep doing it, because you never know where you might end up. You might end up on Crappie Junction on Thursday night. BS and so.
It's true. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and to the people at home, that's a great message. And otherwise, thanks for being here and spending the time with us, because, we love the questions and the comments and the different things that you have along the way. And otherwise, looking forward to seeing everybody on next week's edition of The Night Bite.